This week, as his retirement draws near, we are revisiting some of the highlights of Pat's reporting career.
And you might call this story a tale of two Georges. In November 1988, George H.W. Bush, summer resident of Kennebunkport, was elected president, and Democrats in Washington elected George Mitchell, a son of Irish and Lebanese immigrants in Waterville, Senate Majority Leader. Now, that made Mitchell the most powerful Democrat in Washington as the Bush administration began. So for Mainers, national politics had a distinctly local flavor.
Pat, it seems Mitchell has an enormous task ahead of him.
He does indeed, Richard. In fact, he is already at work. He called a late afternoon session of the Senate Steering Committee, which handles committee assignments and the like. But he's also taken some time out today to talk with well-wishers.
Hello, Mr. President.
The new majority leader and the new president will probably find themselves at odds a lot in the coming months. But for today, George Mitchell and George Bush pledged to work together and joked over what they have in common.
That it is a welcome sign of your good judgment that you have chosen to live in Maine even though you didn't have the good fortune to be born there.
Mitchell says he knew last night that he had the job wrapped up. That was reflected in his cheerful confidence as he entered the caucus room this morning. Senator Mitchell, how are you feeling today?
Very well, thank you.
Inside the ornate old Senate chamber, 55 current and incoming senators had to choose between Mitchell, Louisiana's Bennett Johnston, and Hawaii's Daniel Inouye. It takes 28 votes to win. Mitchell had 27 on the first ballot. Johnston and Inouye, tied at 14 each, put their heads together and decided to move Mitchell's election by acclamation without a second ballot. Mitchell was reluctant to analyze ideological or regional reasons for the vote.
I think it was a matter of senators choosing the person they felt best able to do the job.
Mitchell will now be the man to set the tone for what the Senate does. He says he won't be able to impose his will on the Senate in pushing specific bills, but he will have a lot to say about what issues make it to the floor. He will keep pushing for clean air legislation and acid rain controls, things Robert Byrd opposed.
More significant than the change in majority leader is the change in president in terms of clean air legislation. Vice President Bush has repeatedly stressed that, made it an important part of his campaign. President Reagan, by contrast, was adamantly opposed to such legislation.
He may not get home to Maine as often as he has in the past, but he says the new job is good for Mainers.
People of Maine are Americans, as are the people of every state. And so when you talk about what the concerns of Maine people are, they are, of course, American concerns. They want their country to succeed.
Mitchell admits he's done all right for a guy who might never have made it to the Senate had he not been appointed to the job in 1980.
You know, there are unexpected turns in life, up and down. When I became a federal judge and assumed the bench, I thought I was going to be a judge for life. That was my intention. No one, at least I, could have predicted the events that would occur. And no one can predict the events that lie ahead. So.
Now, what we can predict is that George Mitchell has a big chance to make an impact on the Congress and on the nation as a whole. We can also predict that he's going to get a big new office out of this, a car and driver, and a $10,000 raise. But, of course, that's all secondary. Jan and Richard.
And Senator Mitchell held the majority leader's post until his retirement from the Senate in 1995. But he wasn't done with public service. We're going to look into that part of his story later this week.